Welcome back to another episode of the CFO podcast. So I've titled today's episode as the gold medal mindset inside the brain of top 1% performers. And the reason is that my guest today is a classic example of what it takes to consistently perform at the highest level.
Started with the family, put us on indoor school, they had to sacrifice a bit. That sent the signal to you, right?
What are some of the processes, rituals, habits that a high performer, high achiever like you would have?
So one of them was having real appreciation for the value of my time. The other thing,
sometimes people call it a myth that academic success would not necessarily translate into professional success. But what I've seen with you is that you've been able to successfully bridge both. Is it a myth? Is it not a myth?
I think there is a correlation. I think what it does is it probably gives you the ethos.
I was reading up somewhere, and this is something that you would be living every day. Is like, imagine if AI knows about those millions of different scans, and then the moment whoever scan goes and could just pick up, because based on whatever patterns that they've seen, millions of patterns, this is an early diagnostic, could be treated earlier than
yeah,
right?
The robotics as well, like using robots for performing surgery, that's something obviously we are looking into quite deeply as well. So a lot of opportunity.
Generally, the perception to an outsider like me was that healthcare operates at super high margins, especially in a country like UAE, with the kind of prices we pay over here for healthcare. If you don't have insurance, you're completely busted, right?
First of all,
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the CFO podcast. So I've titled today's episode as the gold medal mindset inside the brain of top 1% performers. And the reason is that my guest today is a classic example of what it takes to consistently perform at the highest level. If I look at his career is decorated with accolades, recognitions, achievements all along. If I look at the academic career as a start, he scored a worldwide distinction in his GCEs, and later on when he was pursuing chartered accountancy, he scored multiple gold medals across Pakistan, and he ended up completing both his CA and ACCA at his first attempt, and that is a rare achievement. Anybody who knows anything about chartered accountancy in Pakistan can definitely validate that. Moving on from there, and most recently, he also completed his MBA from the University of Cornell in Canada. And again, he ended up securing a distinction over there, and he was on the dean's list of top students. I know him for a very long period of time. As a matter of fact, I was just speaking to him. I know him for almost 2 decades now, and what I can definitely say is that he's not just about raw talent. He's about a lot of discipline, relentless execution, and a mindset wired for excellence. If there were any accolades or recognitions or awards for professional career, I'm quite sure his racks would be filled with all of those as well. So I couldn't have been more excited for this episode because he's not just my colleague, he's one of my closest friends. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Khizer. Khizer, welcome to the podcast, man. Thanks for making time for this.
Thank you for inviting me.
I usually start off with some of the earlier influences around you, your friends, your family, and anybody else, your teachers, mentors who shaped up your career and how you have come across all this journey thus far. So share a few things about that.
Horrible friends. Yeah. Horrible. I think started with the family. Really, the parents were, they prioritize education. I think we were sent to school, all our siblings, 2 elder brothers. We were sent to school where they had to stretch themselves. My parents, to put us on indoor school, they had to sacrifice a bit. That sent the signal to you, right? That they mean business, and we should mean business. And then I think similarly, the group of people you surround with yourself with, your friends, and they were like-minded, right? Came from the similar background. They prioritize education, and that surrounds you in an aura, a competitive aura where you really want to excel. That shapes you in your early days. Yeah.
Wonderful. No, indeed, man. We owe it to our parents, and you rightly pointed out. I can so relate to this as well. My parents stretched themselves beyond their means to send me to education, and then I had the luxury of being around friends like you and some of the others, Yusuf, Taimur. Friends do have a great influence. Because I also would like to mention over here, something that I would not say to you is that, man, you're not just a very, very sharp thinker. You've built a reputation for yourself, not just a career, it's a reputation that you've built, and that too across borders, and which makes us very, very proud. I mean, people who have been around you. And what I can tell the audience is that, I mean, it's sometimes a myth that once, I mean, people who are sort of, who are doing very well in their academics or education, they're usually not very welcoming around sharing what they have achieved, but you've been completely the opposite. I still remember to date, guys, that we were approaching our finals, CA final exams or something, and you would so openly spend hours with us on phone trying to explain those concepts to us, which you would take on the fly, but we would struggle to understand. So how I mean, what is this about, Khizer? What is this open-heartedness about?
I think you really, when you're teaching someone else, you're learning yourself. As I said, when you surround yourself with like-minded people, you mentioned a few names. I think pretty much if I talk about ourselves as a group, generally proud of ourselves as a group, right? We be maybe 4 or 5 people really close with reached places. And it's not like I was always imparting knowledge or education. I was getting something back, and sometimes not technical knowledge, then sometimes I would be getting back the ethos, right? You, for example, would, I remember, spend 16-hour days in a library, right? Something that I could never do. But that kind of tells you that there are people there out there working hard, and if you don't get up and do your bit, you will be left behind. So
Sure. I'm not sure whether to take it as a compliment or as laziness, but whatever it is, it is. But Khizer, no doubt, man. I think so many people who had the pleasure of knowing you can definitely validate what I just said. So thank you for whoever you are and however you have been. Khizer, I think I'll move on to something more interesting around this. So Khizer, I mean, I mentioned about quite a few accolades, right, that you've bagged along the way. I mean, distinction in GCEs and all of that. So multiple gold medal in chartered accountancy, and then most recent one as well. So Khizer, I mean, if you were to pick up one and you would say, okay, Asad, this was my favorite, and you could tell us why was that your favorite, that would be beautiful.
that was the gold medal back in chartered accountancy for sure. So I still remember the day pretty vividly. You're refreshing the page every second, right? You wake up early, you're at the page, and you're expecting, okay, I'll pass, right? That's what you're really praying for. And then this comes up, and I think within a few seconds, everyone in my home knew, even though they were sleeping. So it was the first time that you establish yourself in the big leagues. In school and stuff, you achieve something well and good, but that's the first stage where you say, okay, now I've actually made a name where it really matters. Subsequently too, like, you talk about Olympiads, or you talk about the Dean's List or the distinction at Cornell. But the amount of effort that went into that at the time, and in my chartered accountancy, the amount of competition there was absolutely, the other things pale in. I never had to put that much effort in anything else.
No, definitely, Khizer. I mean, speaking about chartered accountants in Pakistan, you're definitely competing at the highest level. Everybody's stretching themselves to the max. You just shared one of my examples. I mean, there are tons of other people and more smarter than me. And then, I mean, I remember you. I still remember to date, every day when I would call you, because we used to talk every day, you'd be like, okay, Azan, I'm done with my day's work and I'm going to watch a movie and sleep. I was like, whoa, okay, this is just another level. So, I mean, you were always calm, relaxed, because I think you were very well prepared, Khizer, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's also about you need to know what works for you.
Yeah.
Like for some people, long days work. For me, they don't.
Oh, wonderful, bro. And I think, Khizer, this is a perfect segue into the next question, which is, again, Khizer, as I said also, it's not just about raw talent, right? So there is discipline, there is process, there is rituals or whatever else. So, Khizer, as somebody said, and it stuck with me, is like, sort of hard, something like execution without talent is like Ferrari without fuel. I mean, you can't run the Ferrari, right, without having proper fuel and passion into it. So, Khizer, what are some of the processes, rituals, habits that a high performer, a high achiever like you would have?
Yeah, I think I had too many rituals, but certainly principles, right? So one of them was very early on, was about having a real appreciation for the value of my time. That doesn't mean I was like a machine and I wouldn't spend time on, entertainment and just slogging it all the time. Not really, actually, quite the opposite, right? I knew I needed that time to decompress, and that meant if for any reason my time was going in an activity which I felt was a waste, it would take me off. If you remember, early on at the firm, we would be doing long hours, and the work did never ticked me off. I really liked the work, but you remember we would be spending a lot of time waiting for a manager's review. That's something that I still carry on with me, that I don't want to waste my time. So that is one. The other thing, I think, as I alluded to, I know that as humans we need to decompress, right? So, but don't get me wrong, everyone, there's different stuff that works for different people. So some people really wanted to spend long days at the library, right? For me, short bursts of studying worked. Study, then a little bit of distraction, then get back to studying. And that's what another, I would say, a habit or a ritual. But I would really break down my studying into short bite-sized pieces and decompress in the middle. Session of FIFA was absolutely for me before I got to studying after waking up. So yeah, I think these were a couple of things, I would say principles or habits which helped me along the way.
I'm going to take an excursion here,
Yeah.
but because you mentioned gaming, Khizer,
Yeah.
what we've also noticed that you've been as good in gaming as you've been in studies or anything else at work. So is there a correlation or of some sorts? Because, I'll share a small anecdote here. So we were sitting in our Go Audit 1 training.
Yeah.
And there used to be this very basic kind of car game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So 2D car game.
2D car game, and then you would race during the breaks and whatever, and then you would win. We would end up winning every single race, every single time. And from then on, we played Call of Duty together, we played FIFA together, and every time you ruined our nights because you always used to win. So what is this?
Short of it, I don't think there's a correlation with other things, just reflexes, or I've always been into sim racing, which develops your reflexes. So that kind
mental reflexes?
Mental, physical reflexes, I think that feeds into gaming.
That was brutal. Shouldn't have asked this question. All right, so, okay. I think this is where I would like to ask you, Khizer, that, so sometimes people call it a myth that academic success would not necessarily translate into professional success. But what I've seen with you is that you've been able to successfully bridge both. You've been a top-class student, and you've been known for your sharp thinking, your perfect execution, your out-of-the-box thinking, and people really come up with complex problems in the professional world to you. So you've clearly bridged both sides. So, Khizer, in your mind, is it a myth? Is it not a myth? How far does academic success translate into professional success? Share your thoughts.
I think there is a correlation, right? Is it as strong as our, Asian parents would like it to be? Probably not. But I think what it does is it probably gives you the ethos that if you are, you need to put in the hard work, you develop that entire ethos to put in that hard work into your studying, you will probably carry that over to work as well. Beyond that, I think it's limited. People who haven't done well in academics really excel and the other way as well. And I've seen that, coming out of my MBA, executive MBA right now too, that I saw both cases. I saw people who were perhaps not so good at the aspects of MBA, but obviously it has a real life aspect to it as well. You are applying all your concepts to real life scenarios, and they would actually do very well on those, even though they might not know what the professor had taught the last day. So I think the correlation is there, but not to that great of an extent. So also depend on the sort of role you go into. Right? If you are a person who's really street smart, but you go into an account, probably basing your talent. Over there, even if you slogged at work, it might not translate into success in the professionals.
I think, Khizer, I would totally agree with what you said around ethos, taking them from your academics and sort of fueling them into your profession. What I've also seen with you, Khizer, is the speed of thinking, the speed of execution. We just talked about how you would be done with your studies for the day, and then you would decompress and you would sleep. So that, of course, means that you have covered all of that in a short period of time. And then somehow, when I saw you working as well, you would generally do things really fast. You would be able to finish multiple things. So I think, do you think speed is also one more thing that you pick up from your academics and inject into your professionals?
I think decision making, speed, perhaps not. I remember, like you mentioned, Timur, he would be done way more before us.
Timur was a nightmare to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. Like blood pressure would be. But I think decision making is in the sense that I would know I'm done for the day, right? I'm done on this particular subject. Or similarly, in my career, what I have carried forward, I feel, is that decision making that this is the extent of data collection I need to do on a research I need to do on a particular subject. I'm ready to make a decision now. I will affect knowledge of something, and I need to move forward, right? I need to take a view. We use that terminology a lot now. Let's take a view and move forward. So that perhaps does carry forward from when you are studying.
Just so it doesn't get lost in translation, why I mentioned it's a nightmare to talk to Taimur is just for clarity for others, is because whenever you would call Taimur, he would be done for the day's study and for the next week's studies as well. And you're like, Taimur, how are you progressing? I'm done, man. I'm done.
Exactly.
And this is just barely when you're barely scratching surface, he's done. So I would consciously avoid talking to him. I mean, especially asking about his progress. But he's a great guy, been very, very helpful. I mean, I've been really from my side, really, guys. I mean, they talk about influences. If I were sitting on the other side and you would ask me that, I would definitely mention the whole trio, which is you, Khizer, you, Taimur, and Yusuf. I don't get to spend a lot of time as we used to back in the day. But again, it doesn't mean that we've forgotten, at least myself, as to how you guys have shaped me up and into whatever I've become. So, been very lucky on that. Khizer, from here onwards, because you mentioned about MBA, I think it's very important for people to know that, Khizer, while you were done with your chartered accountancy and you had excelled and you were already performing at senior roles in your professional career, and yet you decided to pursue an MBA. So run us through your thought process around pursuing an MBA, and what did it bring to you?
So the thought process behind doing an MBA, first of all, was I was in a new place, right? I'd spent all my life in the Middle East, Pakistan, and then I moved to North America. And the first thing I realized is I need a network very quickly, right? So you can go around trying to meet people through coffee chats and other things, but an MBA represents a supercharged way of doing it. And you are now in a group of people who are at senior places who want to network as well. It's not always, both conditions are not always true. So that was the first thing, right? You develop a network, and I knew I needed a network in a new place. I think the other thing was also, it had been a while since I'd been in an academic space, right? And wanted to see if I could prove myself in a completely new place with a completely new set of people. Yes, I had been with professionals and technical people for the 15 years of my career, but now I wanted to see if there are people, and there are people there who are, from all walks of life. You have engineers and people from tech, and so can you stand shoulder to shoulder with them and compete? And particularly in an Ivy League, where we used to hear all sorts of things around top-notch people, which they are, right? It kind of tells, or you ask yourself a question: do I still have it? I think that was the second reason why I did it, and the third reason was I was around a very good bunch of people at work who were very supportive, very appreciative of actually going and developing yourself. So I remember my line manager basically, what will you do this year? Tell me, you have to come back and tell me like a particular specific qualification or something that you want to do. And this is what I have actually came up with. Okay, I don't want to do something technical now. I have enough certification. I want to do something that develop my soft skills, that gives me that network. Sure, sounds good. Go ahead and do it.
Good people end up finding good people. So I think there is nothing more pleasing than a sort of your manager or your superior, whoever, being invested in your development. I think that's good.
And I think particularly with EMBA, right, or MBA in general, I guess, you really benefit from it when you have the time and the space at work to actually apply. So when it comes to leadership, we learned a lot, and at that point in time, I was given that time space to try and implement it, right? I was building my own team. I had go to coaching sessions with them, apply. It was an amazing experience to that end. So if maybe someone is thinking about it, one of my first advice is that make sure you are in a workplace where you will have the time to apply what you're learning.
Perfect. But I mean, as we usually call you, KK, it's also important for the audience to know. I think, look, one of the reasons why I titled this as Inside the Brains of our top 1% performers is because, again, there is this whole lot of value that is with you, and then you emit it to people who are in your immediate surroundings, and of course it's not broadcasted beyond that. So I think we as accountants, we started off as accountants, right?
Yeah.
Of course, then we've grown beyond that into finance and much more. But the idea is that we are generally wired around things like risk, professional skepticism, all of that. Risk taking is definitely not a subject. It's always risk aversion and all of that. So, because what we have seen with you is that you have really not bound yourself with those kind of rules. I've always seen you trying to find things which are exceptions to the rule, thinking outside the box. I don't know if you remember, but at one point we were working together. You were the PE, and I was one of your portfolio companies, and we used to calculate our debt covenants, and and rightly so, we were always able to meet those covenants by virtue and by courtesy of your broader thinking and some collaboration from my end. We were always able to find out ways or the other. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you generally think beyond what's written in front of you. You find out those, I don't want to use the word loopholes, but you're basically trying to find out the way outs, thinking outside the box. So I would like you to tell the younger audience here how to develop that kind of thought process, especially if you're coming off from a accountancy background.
Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned, we are wired with, being very rule based. I think what you really need to do is you need to put yourself in the shoes of your stakeholders, right? If I was on the other side, what would I, and talk again, taking that example of debt covenants, what would the bank be comfortable with? What are the others looking for? So sort of a stakeholder analysis, right? That kind of sticks with me. And then you just need to, there are several frameworks which are there for innovative thinking, and you just need to let your brain run wild, right? Okay, I think one of the, again, maybe going back to some of the academics, there are people when they are studying that study to pass exams. If you remember, when we were studying for last our advanced financial reporting, there were two kinds of teachers which we specifically knew, right? One who you went to pass exams, the other who you went to actually learn accounting. And that's what people, or at least I know you also try to do, that we would not just go to pass exams. We would actually be interested in what's the background if the standard is saying something, right? Go to the basis of conclusion and all those guides and stuff on why is it actually prescribing this rule, and then try to find ways around it or try to play with it. So that's one way of kind of thinking outside the box. Know if there's a rule, what's the background behind it, and then try to exploit it.
Totally. It's like a walk back past the memory lane where
samosa.
I remember an embodied.
Yeah.
Somebody died. But anyway, but you're right, man. We were kind of nerds at that time. I don't know if you remember, there used to be those dissenting opinions, and there used to be one guy who he also used to pick on. I don't know if you remember his name.
Japanese guy.
Yes, Tatsui. Tatsui Yamada or something. Yeah. But absolutely, bro. I'll cut this up quickly, because I forgot what to talk about. So, Khizer, I think there's one very important segment as part of this podcast where I usually try to pick on the expertise from the industry where the guest is coming from. So again, you've worked across multiple industries, but I think most recent one is the most relevant one.
Yeah.
You're working on one of the sort of biggest healthcare giants in the Middle East. You're the group financial controller. You're a finance leader. You're running so many finance transformation projects for them, and I don't know whatsoever many hats you're wearing over there. Yeah. Because I think a value to the audience would be if we could do a SWOT analysis for healthcare business generally, not necessarily Aster, and then as part of doing that, if you could also help us visualize how a typical P&L and a balance sheet of a healthcare business would look like.
Yeah. So I think SWOT analysis, I will probably talk about this region specifically, right? The region that we are in. The region we are in, so talking about the strengths first. I think one strength is coming from the West. We hear about labor shortages. Nursing is absolutely a nightmare over there. Nursing shortages, actually. And that's a strength in the region, that we have the ability, being kind of in the geography that we are in, to have this steady inflow of medical talent, nursing, doctors, and we are able to attract top doctors from around the world as well, which, to be very honest, is a massive strength for this region and healthcare in this region. The other thing is maybe it's a strength / opportunity, but the population growth rate, right now, and the expected one. So again, talking
population growth, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So population growth, again, in the West, tanking. Here it's growing, and it's growing And the people who require healthcare, they are growing in every segment. So you talk about young, middle class. If I talk about segment in terms of income levels, particularly, is growing across all those segments. When you talk about age as a segment, it again is growing across all. So you need people who need, healthcare as babies and as middle age and young people as well. But at the same time, you have those long-term care requirements as well for the aging population. So that's a strength/opportunity too. When we talk about some weaknesses, I think a weakness is the margins are low. Right? It's a regulated market, and it's a market, particularly in certain geographies in the region. There are certain insurers who do have a strong position. They are monopolies in a sense, and they can drive tariff, which means that it's not a high margin business often. And when when it's not a high margin business, for the amount of operational risk we take, if I compare it to other sectors, I've looked at several other sectors. When you talk about education, you talk about manufacturing, F&B, etc. We are taking quite a lot of operational risk in healthcare. You are dealing with people's lives. I think the margins are not there right now to support it, which is because it then leads into a threat that you do not necessarily, you cannot resource yourself properly always, to deal with all that operational risk.
Can I
Yeah.
just step
Sure.
in here just
Sure.
quickly, because I
Yeah.
would like to I'm trying to pull out a thread from this
Yeah.
something, because generally the perception
Yeah.
to an outsider like me was
Yeah.
that healthcare operates at super high margins,
Yeah.
especially in a country like UAE, where you find the best healthcare quality, and then you're like, okay, of course they got to charge for that as well. I mean, the kind of prices we pay over here for healthcare, if you don't have insurance, you're completely busted, right? So I
Yeah.
was thinking that
Yeah.
there must be high margins behind that. So
Yeah.
just run me through this. I mean,
Yeah. So first of all, see, what you pay as a cash patient is very different from what an insurance tariff is, right? So insurance come and negotiate. Then there are concepts of rejections. What you see on the bill is not what is eventually paid always to a healthcare provider, right? A lot of claims, and sometimes those rejections are valid. Sometimes they are not. Since at the end of the day, it's a commercial discussion you keep on having with those insurance companies that, okay, you have rejected 10% of the claim, maybe it should be 5 or it should be 6%. But they are trying to manage their own loss ratios too. The doctor's cost is massive. The cost to run those facilities, considering again the biomedical risks and other things, is massive. So it's not necessarily a high margin. There's a segment which are high value, which are high margin, and that's where I would probably talk about opportunity. So yeah, weaknesses, threats are there, but opportunities are very honestly. One thing, as I said, one I talked about opportunities. Population growth. That is an opportunity, but now kind of healthcare is transitioning from, if I have an issue, I go to a doctor, to preventative and wellness. We are seeing a lot of spend on IVs, which people are taking not because they are sick, but because they want better skin, their general well-being. So that area is certainly an opportunity, and the other one might be a little cliched. And I would say that the sector is ripe not for disruption, but it's ripe for a change in the operating model because of AI. And then again, it's not something that we are seeing is a word just being thrown, but it's already here, right? You have tech and AI now, from diagnostics to operations, submission of claims, to actually, just the other day I was looking at a radiologist who was showing on the screen that this is an x-ray of a person who was having breathing issues, and I've trained myself for 20 years to diagnose that here there's a little bit of pneumonia happening, here this is something else. He flicked a switch, AI came on, and within a second gave the same diagnosis, right? And I've read that in there are certain cases where AI is able to detect these things well earlier than a human doctor would be able to. We talked about we have a huge area called RCM, revenue cycle management, where it's all about submitting these claims to the insurance companies and that requires a huge effort because there are specific codes you need to use when you're submitting a claim that this was the diagnosis and this is the treatment we are giving and all. We communicate with the insurance company. AI coming in and kind of doing that would be a massive game changer for us. And then treatment as well, where I think we will very soon progresses where it's not like AI will take over the treatment and diagnosis, but it will at least, I foresee regulation coming in where it will say, okay, a doctor will have to ask any kind of AI engine, what's your take on this particular case? And if there's a difference in opinion between doctor and the doctor will have to mandatorily do it. And if there is a difference between the two opinions between an AI engine and a doctor, you'll have to go perhaps for the third one. Those kind of things we see coming in, and it will completely change the nature of healthcare, right? It doesn't mean it will replace healthcare providers, but our operating model will completely shift.
KK, I would like to. I was really excited when you said about the AI because KK, whenever I read about AI, the sector which is on top of the list, not in terms of disruption, I see it as an opportunity for your sector, right? Healthcare, it's going to supercharge your sector. I mean, imagine. Things like, which nobody wants to have, like cancer, etc. You mentioned about those early diagnostics. I was reading up somewhere, and this is something that you would be living every day. Is like, imagine if AI knows about those millions of different scans, and then the moment my scan goes, or God forbid, whoever's scan goes, and could just pick up because based on whatever patterns that they've seen, millions of patterns, this is an early diagnostic, could be treated earlier, somebody's life could be saved, right? So, an immense amount of use cases, man, in your industry. It must be very exciting times, right?
The robotics as well, like using robots to do for performing surgery. That's something obviously we are looking into quite deeply as well. So a lot of opportunity.
Insane. I was just reading. It's very, very recent. I'm not even sure if I read it properly, but there was this first ever neural links to be put into somebody's head where they would be able to see. Somebody who's blind would be able to see based on neural links. So this is the first time ever ever in the world is going to happen in UAE.
I think why I'm actually putting my finance hat back on, one of the strengths is that in UAE and the region particularly, healthcare has ready access to capital and capital markets, whether it be equity and debt, and that leads to these things, right? You have all the entire spectrum of capital providers, whether it be banks, development banks, private equities, family offices, the government itself, ready to invest in such things, and they want there is particularly UAE, there's a drive to also create it as a medical value tourism destination. So we want to. The initial bit was to actually get people to come here for the use. Now there is that let's make center of excellences for the region over here so that people for these advanced treatments are coming in.
I would like to also check with you that, so for example, of course, there is this AI disruption and opportunities for the healthcare providers themselves, and then from a user angle as well, like myself. Now that I have access to some surface level AI, which is GPT, right? So I would generally, if I get a blood test report, which I would struggle to understand previously, I would just put it on GPT and just ask him what this means and explain it to me in simple words, and they would explain to me in simple words exactly what's happening, what this test is for, what does it say for you. So quite a few things happening on the user side as well, no?
It's also you now have access to your health data through your smart apps, smartwatches and stuff as well, and I think. That's where the preventative side will come in. Now users are continuously monitoring their own health, right? Your heart rate starts shooting up all of a sudden. You can certainly go, and if it's connected to some sort of a AI engine, it will tell you, probably something is looking off. But certainly not encouraging people to put their test results in VTN.
I've usually turned the sharing of results off. But
No, from the perspective that still go and see a doctor, right?
Totally.
I myself am rigged that way. I avoid seeing a doctor as much as possible. But certainly there have been situations where you're putting something into Google, obviously not AI at that point in time, and then you panic, right? Oh, this is telling me.
No, Google is always killing me next day.
Exactly.
So 100%. I find I find ChatGPT quite reassuring. It talks to me like a human, unless Google is like, you're dying, you have cancer. For sure. You have cough, you have throat cancer.
So I think that positive coming every time we search online, we are not dying. Previously.
No, man, this is phenomenal
Yeah.
progress in this sector. I mean,
Yeah.
from I don't know early days of penicillin, I don't know 1940 something
Yeah.
to all of this and
Yeah,
all of what is to come.
antibiotics too. So, as we, one of the major scares is still to an extent that we are running out of antibiotics because of bacteria getting resistant, and that's where again AI is coming in and kind of very quickly identifying new antibiotics which the bacteria is not yet resistant to.
Fabulous. Okay, so cool. Would you also help us visualize how does a
Well,
P&L and a balance sheet of a healthcare provider looks
yeah.
like?
So the first thing, obviously, revenue, right? Revenue we have from P&L perspective, revenue comes from our services. One thing is also healthcare providers, particularly if you talk about Aster, our model is that we want to be in kind of quite a holistic healthcare provider. So it's not just hospital and clinics consultation or IP or OP, call it, coming in. We also are into retail. So pharmacies are there, distribution businesses are there. So that's all revenue. But one thing that is a little bit unique to us is that you won't see our full revenue appearing on our P&L, what we call gross revenue, because of this rejection concept that we know at any point in time we are giving services that we won't recover some of it, right? 5 to 10%, whatever our rejection rate is, we do, complex models to understand what those rejection rates are, and we simply report revenue net of that.
Sure.
So you don't even see the differential between gross and net on our P&L. Other than that, there's obviously the material costs, that the consumables, the implants, the medicines that we use to treat patients. There's a massive amount of staff costs. So there's an entire army of people, doctors, nurses, the operations staff, that's the entire show. And then you have to remember it's a multi-location business, right? You have multiple facilities, so the licensing costs, the cost of running the administration of those facilities, the rent is a massive thing. And again, people go in different ways. Some healthcare providers own real estate, some don't. Some want to run an asset-light model. So in some cases, when switching to the balance sheet, you will see massive amounts of assets, kind of hard assets sitting over there in terms of land and building. In some cases, you won't. So it's not a straight formula. A massive amount of tangible assets in all cases for healthcare providers. Some might keep it an asset-light model. We have a definitely a huge amount of receivables, because it's a trend that's actually changing now. Historically, again, you have to remember we differ from most businesses, that in a business such as a typical business, right? I come to you, I buy something, I go to a service, you pay me, we are done. But you as a patient come to me, I serve you, but you don't pay me. Right, I have to put it into a claim that takes time, it to an insurance company which analyzes it and then pays some time down the line. Right, and sometimes they don't even, as I said, they don't pay the entire amount. They defer some of that amount. Okay, when we sit for a reconciliation, a year, 2 years, sometimes even 3-4 years down the line, we'll pay the remaining bit over at that point in time. That creates a huge amount of receivables. But now the governments, they are building in, bringing in portals and regulation to try bring that entire revenue cycle to a shorter period. Other than that, as I said, to match a huge receivable, you need payables as well to just manage the entire working capital. Yeah, so I think other than that, I wouldn't say there's anything unique other than those couple of aspects that I talked about. Tax is a new thing, so that's certainly on the P&L.
KK, one thing that stands out, of course, is the receivables bit.
Yeah.
So you touched upon that. How does the receivable cycle look like? I mean, is it a 30-day cycle or could be more?
It's more, and it differs by geography. So if I talk about UAE, it's now within 100 days.
100 days.
Yeah, now within 100 days. It was up above. It's coming down. New regulations have come in since last year. So also again, one thing about the revenue cycle in healthcare is that you have what are called TPAs. These are claim processes, right? So when they act as middlemen. So when a healthcare facility submits a claim, it often first goes to a claims processing company, which is a TPA, third party administrator, and then they are the ones who analyze the claim, determine whether it's correct or not, and they would then transmit that information to the insurance company that okay, this is the claim that is valid. We have validated it. Now you need to pay. Previously, at least in the UAE or Dubai particularly, the TPA company would first pay the TPA. The TPA would pay to you. Again, that elongated the entire cycle. That's now been shortened. The insurance companies are paying us directly. But in a certain other geographies, it's even up to 200 days that it takes for us to recover the money.
Wow. And as you rightly said, then you would need some sort of working capital facility
Exactly.
or something to be able to
Yeah.
balance that out.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. Thanks a lot. It was quite insightful. I mean, we only have, of course, surface level understanding
Yeah.
about this, but good to know as to how it looks like from the inside.
Yeah.
KK, I think we are moving towards the end of our conversation. KK, one of the reasons why I do this, and I've mentioned it many times, there are 3 different audience personas that I'm addressing this to.
Yeah.
Very young finance professionals who are just starting out,
Yeah.
barely having any idea.
Yeah.
As we were once upon a time.
Yeah.
Middle management who are stepping into more senior ones and those senior management. So, KK, because this podcast is specifically for the first
Yeah.
segment, KK, what advice would you have for them at this stage of the career, focusing on the academics? How should they approach their professional career to begin?
Yeah, I think first thing is know what you want to do. If you're going into accountancy, why? Is it something just a means to an end? Like, is it just to earn a livelihood, or do you actually think your mind works in a way that you see yourself sitting and going through spreadsheets all day, right? So that is the first thing that you need to decide. Are you geared for this? Whatever you might be wanting to get into. The second thing is, I think, particularly talking about people who are transitioning from students to a professional career. I think one thing that is key is finding a role that gives you opportunities. Oftentimes, you select a role because the name is good. That's not necessarily the right choice. You want to land in a role where you are given that profile. You are not a resource who is supposed to just generate a report, but you are given access to boardrooms and other high profile people and mentors too, so that acts as a springboard. You are given access and you're able to make a name. That does not happen in all companies and all roles, by the way. And okay, if you don't get that opportunity, which is fine, like it's not always possible, then once you get inside, try to seek out those opportunities. I'll tell, like, even in my organization, I've seen people who are very ambitious, and even if it's not the organization that's structured in a way that they are always pushed up and into high profile positions, they find those opportunities themselves. So that is another piece of advice, that profile matters a lot. Don't be a fly on the wall. If you get an opportunity, oftentimes young people are put into high stakes position and high stakes meetings, and they kind of shut off. They are in a listening mode only. Don't be a fly on the wall. Speak. If you are there, that means someone has already taken a decision that they value you, right? They value your advice and what you have to say. So don't make them question that decision without even having taken a shot, and hopefully you'll do well.
Totally. Seen you always speaking your mind, KK, in high stakes meetings. You've been not just the voice of sanity as well, but also a critique as well. I mean, you haven't generally. I haven't seen you just flow in the direction of the water. You've seen what direction should you take, and you've definitely done that. So that brings a lot of value. I mean, if you are just a yes man, I don't think you add a lot of value to that. I'm not necessarily you need to be a naysayer on everything, but just as you rightly said, speaking your mind is very important. KK, what I've also seen with you is that you've been you showcase a lot of empathy towards your team members as well. I mean, and you strike the right balance between the kindness as well as making sure that you apply enough pressure to be able to extract the output. You invest in their development as well. I've seen some of the people who have grown around you. So how would you advise some of the people who have teams under them?
I think leadership is something that some people obviously are born with. Some people do need to develop it, and you need to spend time. So I as I said, I spent some time developing through my MBA program or whatever. I spent time developing it. So first of all, you need to appreciate that. Just if you talk about us from where we were very early on, 2 years into our careers, were given 10-man teams, right?
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, we have done it, so we will be able to do it in the future. But that's not the case. You often need instruction to be able to deal with teams. The first is acknowledge it. Perhaps you're born with it, well and good. But if you're not, take the time to actually leadership. And then the other thing is treat people as how you would want to be treated. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. KK, what I generally do towards the end of the podcast, just to have a ending on a high, kind of a fun ending. So what I do is a rapid fire round. So there are list of 5 questions that I have. I'm gonna
Okay.
shoot them towards you quickly and would expect a concise answer. So KK, here you go. If you had a superpower, what would that be and why?
Stopping time.
Stopping time for yourself only.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And why? So you could do a lot.
So you could do a lot. There's so much to do for time.
Nice. All right. One movie character that captures your work ethic.
I think, at least I hope, Iron Man.
Right. You are one, man. You are one. If you were to advise back your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
To take it easy. At that age, small problems seem big. They certainly are not, right? So I would probably tell myself it will work out. Enjoy yourself more. Cool. Yeah, and have good food.
Thank you. And then if you could instantly download any skill in Matrix style, what would it be?
A Matrix style skill. If I talk professionally, I think winging a presentation without preparation, right? I've seen some people do it.
Yeah.
They are amazing at it. Not me.
That's a skill. You're right, man. I would love to have that as well. Yeah. KK, one line advice to a 23-year-old finance grad entering their first board meeting.
I think I touched upon it earlier.
Yeah.
That don't be a fly on the wall and make yourself known, make yourself heard.
100%.
And that's how you get into even higher places.
Totally, man.
Yeah.
Totally, man. Liberate yourself, speak your mind.
Yeah.
100%. Great message. KK, thank you very much, man.
You.
It's been a pleasure talking to you more formally, but still we were able to strike some fun. It was very insightful, KK, and I'm sure the audience would have found it equally valuable.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Cool. Okay, guys. So this was the end of our episode with Khizer Kapadia. What I can say about him is that from gold medals to boardrooms, what Khizer tells us is that it's not just about raw talent and intelligence. There is a lot of discipline, there is process, there is principles, relentless execution, and a mindset wired for excellence. Until next time, if you would like to connect with Khizer Kapadia and know a little bit more about him, he's quite active on LinkedIn. You can find him on LinkedIn and connect with him. Until next time, have a good one. Cheers.